Welcome to Recording the Dialogical Self, the official podcast brought to you in collaboration with the International Conference of the Dialogical Self 2026 in Thessaloniki. I'm your host, Prodromos Tarasis, and today I have the honor to be joined by Miguel Gonçalves.
Good. Very good.
Okay.
Very good pronunciation.
Okay. Who is Professor, School of Psychology, University of Minho in Portugal.
Yeah.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Did you have the chance to see Thessaloniki?
Yeah, I really walk a lot.
Have you ever been here?
No, it's my first time.
Okay. It's a bit easier now, which is August. Well, I was reading all the research you've done on the presentations, and I've made up some questions. But if you want to say something in between or discuss anything else, it's like an open conversation. First of all, I was thinking, like, in the context of psychotherapy, we have clients that present deeply conflicting internal voices, fragmenting life stories. How can a therapist effectively use the dialogical self theory or any other skills in order to help them construct a more cohesive personal narrative?
Perhaps I should start with my trajectory as a therapist and as a professor of psychotherapy, because it's not it's not a common trajectory. I started with my mentor, and at the time, a long time ago, he was exploring narrative therapy from a cognitive perspective. So it was a kind of narrative therapy, different. It was constructive oriented. It was different than the narrative therapy from Michael White and David Epstein. So I started by there. I did some training in that method. And then I moved my interest to narrative therapy in the tradition of Michael White and David Epstein. And I did my training as a systemic therapist. But then I need to teach, at my university, the teaching is mainly CBT oriented. So I got back to my roots as a CBT therapist. And I would like to believe that voyage through systemic narrative and so on helps me be a better CBT therapist, but I'm not sure about it. It's being completely honest, because you probably know that therapists inflate their own value as therapists. So we have this problem that if you ask a group of therapists who is above the average in terms of efficacy, a lot of them will say they are of average in terms of efficacy with their clients. Which is not possible statistically.
Yeah. Why do you believe this happens?
Sorry?
Why do you believe this happens?
I think this is a psychological process, and it's in a sense I think you should look at this. This happens in other professions also. The kind of inflation of your value as a professional. And I think that probably the therapists that say that they are lower than the average probably are in burnout. So that's not a good thing. As a therapist, you need to be optimist. It's very difficult to be an effective therapist if you are not able to maintain, if you want an high position of optimism, that things will change, that it's possible to change, that there are other ways of seeing and perceiving things, even when they are very difficult. So I think that this therapist bias probably is a function of this also, of the over-optimistic style of the therapist that help them cope with difficulties in therapy. So this is one guess.
Yeah. By saying that I can provoke change, I can change.
Yes, I can do it.
I can do it. I can provoke. Sure. I can help people. So I'm good.
Yes. So if you trust you can do it, you are probably not being very effective as a therapist, because it's not. If you transmit pessimism to the client, it's terrible, right? So that's not a good.
Are we accused of that? Like, I think some people accuse therapists as, okay, you're very optimist, you think that everything happens, everybody changes, I will change too. I think it's like an accusation we have as therapists.
that we are over-optimistic.
Yeah, that we say like everybody changes, so we can provoke change, so we can help everybody.
In fact, research shows that not everybody changes.
It does.
That we have clients that, in fact, they do not change, they don't change. They don't achieve the amount of change that we want. Therapist doesn't work to everybody, unfortunately. But your question was about the dialogical self in psychotherapy, and I really think that most of the I think we can look at this in two different ways. One way is in which sense the dialogical self theory can help us develop new approaches, new strategies to deal with clients, promoting the good things that the dialogical self supposes they are good. They increase flexibility, increase the acceptance of contradictions, contribute to a coherent but multiple story or self-story. So I see that there are, at least from what I know, a lot of people in Greece developing these kind of methods, even in systemic therapies. But I also think that there are a lot of strategies that have been developed outside the direct influence of the dialogical self theory. For instance, in systemic therapy, the reflecting team from Kim Anderson. It's clearly a dialogical task, but it's not guided theoretically by dialogical self theory. Probably you already deceased, but probably haven't read anything about Hubert Dermis or dialogical self before. And the result of the task in which the therapist reflects in front of the family and discuss what they are seeing.
These are voices.
These are different positions that are that may become promoter positions that are offered to the family as a tentative framing of their situation. So this example clearly shows that a different an approach that doesn't refer to dialogical self theory. It's clearly dialogically, we can see it as really dialogical. So I think we have these two possibilities, that is influence at the onset by the theory, the dialogical self theory, to think how can we develop strategies, tools, in a sense. Strategies are therapeutic strategies are tools. I really love the sentence, the claim by Miucci, the therapist, when he said you need to learn the theory and the strategies to be a therapist, but not need to forget it. And you just be a person, So I really think this is true. We need to learn strategies, and in a sense, I really think that it doesn't matter a lot if these strategies are CBT or psychoanalysis or systemic therapies or experiential therapies. Probably different therapists learn different models that fit better their own way of seeing life, difficulties, and so on.
For instance, we have models that say this is wrong, this is right.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah, and you have, the dialogical self theory says, everything is right, let's import some democracy in it. But CBT says, this is wrongful thinking. How do you combine?
I don't see that a good CBT therapist says to a client or thinks this is wrong, to be honest. I think that's bad CBT from my perspective. I would approach the way, I really love the idea from Michael White about curiosity. He has an assertion in which he says the therapist need to be curious about people's lives, but it's a curiosity that I can't quote from the top of my head, but the idea was it's a curiosity that asks what could be different than this. Okay, how things can be different. Of course, if you ask how things can be different, you need to understand how things are now. But you need to have this idea of, okay, this is how the client is feeling, thinking, conceptualizing reality, relationships, but how could this be different in this situation? So the client is not doomed, it's not cursed to see the reality this way. I think this same idea you can ask from a civic perspective. You see, if you are, I always teach my students to be curious when they are asking questions and they are trying to understand the cognitive processes and the way the client is thinking about reality, to be curious about their way of understanding. So it's not, I think that's a wrong way to, probably there are CBT therapists that work this way, but this is from my perspective not very productive. If you just say to a person, this is the wrong way of thinking about this or that, you need to be curious about how are you understanding this, how are you comprehending reality, how could this be different than it is now currently.
Are the students asking, like, for instance, am I doing this right?
Yeah, sure. Because, for instance, in CBT is really interesting because when you are doing cognitive restructure from a back perspective, and you are not curious, you are not formulating. Usually, you are not formulating questions. Even if you formulate the questions, it's a disguised question.
In order to make you think.
You are asking a question, but clearly you are guiding.
In order to make somebody think. Yeah.
Okay, so, and I don't think this is really productive. It's much more productive if you ask a true question. And a sign for this would be the client saying, well, I never thought about this. This is really a nice marker that you are in the right way. You know, if the client says, well, my husband is asking me all the time, that's the wrong question. Okay? That's a question that it will lead nowhere, because it's a repetitive question. There is no novelty in it. So I really think, and also we have research showing that for the majority of clients, the model in terms of efficacy of the therapy doesn't matter. What is known in the research as double-word verdict. There are also research showing that for some clients, the model matters, but for the majority of clients, it doesn't matter a lot. Or saying this in a different way, if you need to choose a therapist, I would choose a therapist because of the person, not because of the model. Okay.
But you have now clients like choosing a model. I have clients telling me like, okay, I've chosen you.
Yeah, sure.
Because, okay, I've read about your but
it's really
I've chosen you because I was wondering that if family therapy can suit for me. And if something doesn't go the way they want, they say, okay, would the CBT help me more than your...
Yeah, sure. It makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. Of course, family therapists, mainly when you think about working with families or working with couples, sometimes it's different than the models that are centered just on the individual. But I remember a client, this was a long time ago, that she approached me and said, I want to do therapy with you. I want you to be my therapist because I need to do narrative therapy. I already tried CBT and didn't work. And I said, okay, let's work together. And we start doing at the beginning narrative therapy. I can't recall the entire case, but it was a very interesting case because what I discovered doing narrative therapy with her was that I discovered why CBT didn't work. And CBT didn't work because when she was working with CBT therapists, she was one step ahead of the therapist. And instead of understanding what in CBT is called automatic thoughts and how and when they emerge, she was already thinking about alternative thoughts. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So she's trying to find alternatives. And of course, my understanding at that time was, if she doesn't understand the automatic thoughts, how they emerge, how they make sense for her in terms of a person. If she doesn't stay with the suffering, it's pointless to try to find alternative thoughts, because they are very superficial.
Yeah, it's like a philosophical discussion.
It's like positive thing.
Yeah.
So at a certain point in our therapy, I said, you know what? I think it's time for going to CBT now. But to understand the automatic thoughts, we are discussing automatic thoughts now. We are discussing the way you think about things that you are not aware of, and these are automatic thoughts. So I see it now, CBT phase. So it's time for CBT. But I don't want to think about alternative thoughts and ways of dealing with these thoughts. We need to understand them first. Okay. And it was very productive. So you see, even in one case, we can move from a model to another if you are able to work with these models, of course. You need to be able to. I think models are tools,
Yeah.
So
and if she would stay in narrative therapy, she would work the same things.
Yeah, sure.
Like staying in the narrative.
Sure. Without
changing the narrative, without changing the ways she thinks about.
Yeah. So. So this is the way I think about therapy in general. It's, and I think DST, Dialogical Self Theory, can be helpful as a way of understanding the voices and the positions behind the narratives that clients tell, and also to understand the dynamics between client and therapist in the session. The relationship and the way they connect to each other. So I think it's a model that could be really helpful to understand these issues.
You were saying that this client of yours was a little bit of in a rush of changing things. Do you think that this is a case in clients nowadays, that they think that things have to be in a rush, they have to be fast paced, they have to be fast solutions, in this world, like digital things, everything says
very fast.
10 things that will make you change, 30 things that will make you walk. I don't know.
Sure. But of course, they then it's easy to, I really recall this clients of mine that this was the first session. And she was agoraphobic. At that time. She had some hypochondriac thoughts and fears, and she had also difficulties relating with her husband. And at the end of the therapy, I asked her, "So, what do you like to change in therapy? How can I be useful?" And she said, I like to stop being an agoraphobic. I want to get rid of my health anxiety, and I want that the relationship with my husband goes smoothly, and I want this pretty fast. That was a time when I applied what I learned from strategic therapists, and I reclined in the chair, made a pause, and says, "I don't think that's gonna happen." And she looked at me surprised and asking, "Aren't you a psychologist?" And I said, "Yes, I am. Don't you believe that people are able to change?" So we switched roles. Can you see? I was advocating that change was difficult. It's not easy. And she was advocating that change was easy. And it was funny because at the end of this short conversation, at the end of the session, she said to me, "So it will be helpful if I help." And I said, yeah, it would be a good idea if to help. And she prescribed to herself an exposure exercise for the next week. I didn't talk about exposure at all, which was very interesting, So, so this is an example of position and repositioning, and the way I refuse as a therapist to be in a position that I need to promote change very quickly, as you were saying, which will be very difficult for me to handle, and probably to make the therapy effective.
As we were speaking, I was wondering if a less experienced therapist would get into this. Like, okay, are you a psychologist? Can you change me? Are you capable enough?
Yes, I think so. My feeling at that time, it was funny because when she said all those things, I felt pressure. I felt real pressure as a therapist, and I thought, if I accept this, I am without any possibility of promoting change, because I will be pressured to change, and she will make that, in a sense, she will say, you are responsible for my change. And what I said was, no, you are responsible for change. So you need to, but I agree that probably a therapist that was not so attentive to the feeling of pressure. You see, it's interesting because here we can have a dialogical reading in terms of what she was doing and what kind of positions were promoted in me by her movement. Because I felt really anxious at that point when she said all those things and said, and I want to be fast. You need to be fast. A few sessions, okay? Because I don't want to spend my money. So it was a kind of changing positions at that moment with
Do you have these moments?
Yeah, it happens. Fortunately, it happens to all therapists, right? Sometimes they don't happen.
Or moments that you wonder, am I helping?
Sure, of course. It's also important to ask these questions to clients in a more or what is helpful so far, what was helpful in this session, in which ways are our conversation helpful. It's also a kind of questions that are very important to make sense of what's going on in therapy.
I have some people in supervision saying, okay, we established what is wrong and what is right. We established what has to be done and has to be changed, but the client doesn't change. Do you have these kinds of questions in supervision?
Yeah, sure, of course. Because the supervisees, students are doing to you what the former client was doing to me. They are asking to easy solutions.
But they might ask themselves, like, I did the right things. Like, okay, I cooked the food.
Yes.
Why isn't it tasty?
I would say that it's always client, I said it's always client. It's the client that has the power to change, and it's the client that has the power to avoid change, or to think that the change that we are proposing, it's meaningless, or it's not the change that they want. So I think the power, to be honest, I see therapy could be magic in a sense. But there is no magic without the client. It's the client that we propose. We use tools that the client may use or not, and if the client doesn't use them, I don't think that change will operate in the ways that we wish. So I think if you are using tools that with other clients, people are different, so with different stories. Even it's funny because CBT has a very interesting thing, because people see that CBT is easy, it's easy to do. For instance, exposure, it's easy to do exposure. It's not. It's very difficult to do effective exposure,
It's easy to expose, but it's not easy to elaborate.
It's not only that. It's difficult to implement exposure in a way that is effective. It's difficult when exposure works to stay with the client's suffering, because you need to be there. You need to tolerate the suffering of the client. And it's not easy to make sense of what's going on to the client, to elaborate what is going on. So when we teach students about exposure, they think at first time it seems that it's easy, but it's not easy, in fact. And again, if you are, imagine, I was recalling a story. Once I was working with a client and we were doing exposure, and the exposure wasn't working. She was doing the exercises with me in the session. She was doing the exercises outside, and when we explored better what was going on, was that she was doing the exercises, and at the same time she was criticizing herself. So she was doing the exercise and she was saying, "You are really stupid for not being able to tolerate this. How come you are an adult, you are still coping with this? You are a really, really bad person." So this kind of self-criticism, she didn't tell me at the first time. I was not able to understand that this was occurring. But when we explored more what was going on during the exercises, it became clear that this was not helping doing exposure, because she was not doing exposure. She was criticizing herself. She was criticizing herself in a very painful way. So we had to cope with the anxiety, but the anxiety was nothing compared to the self-criticism. So self-criticism were more important than the anxiety that she was feeling in the situations.
Yeah. But she was there trying.
She was trying. She was trying, but she was trying in the wrong way, if you want. Because she was very self-critical. So, of course, we changed direction of therapy in the sense that self-criticism was not helpful, and we need to address self-criticism first. So. You see again, you have a tough voice here, tough eye position, criticizing the self while you are doing something very difficult. So you have two dangers now. You have the danger of the anxiety that you are feeling, and you have the danger of the self-criticism. So it's impossible to cope with this at the same time.
You have another voice that says, "I have to be here, I have to change, I want to change, I will try. I will make my exercises."
Yeah, but in a sense, this was in coalition. At least that was my reading at that time. This was in coalition with the self-critical voice. So it's funny because it's not a productive voice to move therapy forward, It would be better if she said, "This is too much for me," and she could accept this. This would mean that she would be more tolerant with herself, not so destructive to herself.
Yeah, I had a client that switched from CBT to family therapy because he was a really nice guy, and he was doing everything everybody asked him to. So he had some exercises, and he had to write.
Okay.
And he had to write like a journal every day of certain things. He had some OCD problems.
Okay.
And he preferred to change therapist, but not say to his previous therapist that
I'd like to write.
Yeah, I don't like to write. Yeah. Since I was like a child, I detested writing.
Yeah, sure. Of course, the traditional CET way, in a sense, you have the exercises, but I don't see they are mandatory. I see we can work differently. I always remember another client that it doesn't matter the complaints or the diagnosis, but he had done CBT previously and it didn't work, and he had the same problem writing and writing his thoughts and situations. And it was really interesting that we had one session. I was lucky, but we had the first session, and what I did was Socratic questioning. So I was using a CVT technique. I was doing Socratic questions about the problem. And I remember that at the end of the session, he said, well, I don't know how to say this in English, but the idea was, it seems that my problem is, the things that we use sculpture. I don't know the name. So, like statues of sand. He said something like, it looks like my problem is made like a statue of sand. So it fall apart.
Yeah.
So he had this feeling at the end of the session that the problem, the construction of the problem, in a sense, was based on assumptions that don't make sense. And this was on session. And he has done, I don't know how many sessions of CBT to challenge this, So I'm not saying I am a great therapist. I think I was really lucky in the way that our conversation,
and a good timing,
and also the time, of course. I really think that time is very, very important.
Yeah, timing is, I think.
People need time. The question that people need time to reflect. There are things that are very difficult to make sense at a certain point in life, and they make all sense 1 or 2 years after. When you look back, then you are able to elaborate on that.
One last question, which was I derived from our conversation. When is the right time to stop therapy?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. I don't know how to reply.
Not to stop, like to end, let's say. Or to conclude.
I think that in successful cases, response is easier. It's very easy, For instance, I don't know if you have this feeling, but with me, what usually happens at the end of successful therapy is that the sessions become shorter.
Yeah.
At the beginning, 1 hour was not enough. And at the end, after 20 minutes or half an hour, it's done. You don't have anything else to talk about. You have the feeling that you have said everything. The client has told you everything, and everything is running smoothly, So I would say that when things are going well, this could be a good sign. Of course, the other signs are the reduced suffering that you can see in the client, the way the client is coping with the difficulties. So I don't think your question was centered on successful therapy, but
in all cases, there is a part which is successful.
I think the most difficult decision is when you have unsuccessful cases, that you are working with a person and you feel that things are not moving on, and you start thinking at a certain point, could another therapist be different here? Could another therapist, a different person with a different perspective, with a different model, be a difference in this person's life? And I think the problem with this, you need to be careful to discuss this with the client, because if you discuss this with the client too soon, you may be communicating a pessimistic approach. We are returning to the beginning of our conversation.
You can't do it.
Yeah. So but I think that with some clients at a certain point, you are ethically obliged to do this, to pose this question, to discuss with the client that we seem to be without any significant movement, and we need to think what's going on here, and if it's another therapist or therapy or approach or more intensive therapy could be helpful. And my impression, my experience is that most of the times clients react really well to this, and they could say, okay, do you have any suggestion? Or no, I want to stay with you because, okay, if the clients say, I want to stay with you, the question is, okay, but what is helpful? What was helpful so far that lead you to this decision to stay with me? So I think, again, it's a relational issue. And again, to finish with dialogical self, I think the dialogical self theory helps you think about these relational issues in a more complex way.
Thank you so much for being here and
It was a pleasure.
sharing all these nice ideas. Hope to see you soon in another conference.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.